Hey everyone! Today we're going to dive deep into one of the most powerful stories ever told, the Passover from Exodus chapter 12. And I want you to know this is way more than just ancient history. It's like finding a blueprint, a foundational pattern for what deliverance and salvation really look like, a pattern that just keeps echoing through time. So, right at the heart of this whole story is this incredible, almost paradoxical question. It really flips our whole idea of power and victory on its head, right? It sets the stage for a kind of deliverance that isn't won by human strength or a mighty army, but by a divine sacrifice. We're going to unpack that. Okay, so before any of the drama, before a single drop of blood is even shed, God does something, well, kind of mind-blowing. He hits the reset button on time itself. This is the very first move, and it signals that what's about to happen is so massive, it literally requires a whole new way of looking at history. What we're seeing here is a total paradigm shift. You see, back then, calendars weren't just about marking days. They were huge theological statements. Egypt's calendar, it was all about the sun, the cycles of the Nile, the power of nature, and, of course, the god-king Pharaoh. But God gives Israel a new calendar. It's lunar, and it isn't anchored in nature, but in this one specific act of redemption. God is basically saying, my power, not Pharaoh's, controls time. Your story starts with me. And that brings us to this crucial point. For Israel, their real identity as a people doesn't start with their family tree, with Abraham. It starts right here. This is their spiritual birthday, born out of slavery. From now on, their entire history is defined by how they were delivered. It establishes this profound principle: who you are is completely wrapped up in how you were saved. All right, so that leads us to the centerpiece of this whole ritual, the lamb. And the rules for picking this lamb were incredibly strict, and for a very good reason. They were establishing a principle that's going to echo for centuries. Only a perfect substitute will do. You know, this lamb wasn't just grabbed at the last minute. Nope. It was chosen on the 10th day of the month and then kept with the family until the 14th. That 4-day window was critical. First, it was for inspection. You had to be absolutely sure it was perfect. But there's something else, something deeper. Bringing that animal into your home, you'd get attached to it. It became familiar. Its death was meant to be personal, to really cost you something emotionally. And of course, for Christians, this is just a stunning foreshadowing of Jesus' final week in Jerusalem, where he was put under intense scrutiny by all his enemies. So let's break down these 3 characteristics, because they are just packed with meaning. First, without blemish. This sets up the whole idea of substitutionary atonement. Think about it. A flawed substitute would just need its own sacrifice, right? So only the perfect can stand in for the imperfect. Second, it had to be a male lamb, directly corresponding to the firstborn males who were under judgment. And finally, of the first year. This means it was in the prime of its life. You weren't offering something old or weak, but life at its absolute peak. And now we get to the climax of the whole preparation, the application of the blood. And this wasn't just about marking a door. No. This was an ancient, powerful, spiritual act that tapped right into the culture of covenant making. To really get what's going on here, you have to know about something called the threshold covenant. In the ancient world, a doorway wasn't just a way in and out. It was a sacred space, almost like an altar. If you slaughtered an animal there and put its blood on the threshold, you were sealing a pact, a covenant of protection between a host and a guest. So the Israelites are basically painting their doorways with this covenant sign, inviting God to be their divine protector. And you have to understand, the stakes of a covenant like this were incredibly high. To step over the blood on the threshold meant you were accepting the protection, but to step on it, that was the ultimate sign of contempt. And knowing that context gives this verse from the New Testament its terrifying power. To trample the blood of the covenant is to literally reject God's offer of sanctuary. And this is a really crucial distinction. God says, when I see the blood, I will pass over you. Their safety had nothing to do with how they felt inside. An Israelite could have been shaking with fear, totally faithless in that moment. But if the blood was on the door, they were safe. It's this powerful picture of a salvation that is extra nos. It's outside of us. It depends completely on the work of the substitute, not on our feelings. So what did they use to apply this life-saving blood? Not some fancy golden brush. It was a bunch of hyssop. This was just a common, humble, everyday plant. But, and this is key, it was always used in rituals of purification. So its use here means the blood doesn't just protect you from death, it cleanses you. And then you get that direct link to the cross in the Gospel of John. I mean, it's just breathtaking. A tiny detail connecting the shadow to the reality thousands of years later. Okay, so they're protected. Now the ritual shifts from protection to sustenance. After the blood was applied, the Israelites had to eat a very specific meal, where every single element was designed to teach them something about the freedom they were just about to get. This meal was like a masterclass in theology you could taste. The lamb was roasted with fire, a symbol of judgment. The substitute endured that fire so the people inside wouldn't have to. The unleavened bread, that symbolized the crazy haste of their departure. They didn't even have time for the dough to rise. It also became a symbol of purity, of leaving the leaven or the corruption of Egypt behind. And the bitter herbs, well, that was a visceral reminder of the bitterness of slavery, to make sure they never ever forgot what they were being saved from. And get this, even how they stood was part of the ritual. This was not a relaxed sit-down dinner. They had to eat fully dressed and ready to move. Tunics tucked into their belts, sandals on their feet, staff in hand. It was a liturgy of emergency. This physical readiness was an outward sign of their spiritual alertness. It basically said, we are in this house, but we are not of this house. We are ready to go at a moment's notice. So, we've walked through all these powerful symbols, right? The new calendar, the perfect lamb, the blood on the door, this emergency meal. Now, it's time to connect all the dots. Because the New Testament writers look at this entire event and say, this was all a shadow, a prophetic preview that finds its ultimate meaning and fulfillment in one person. All those years, all those annual rituals, they were all pointing forward to a single final event. The claim of Christianity is that simple. Jesus is that one-time fulfillment. He is the reality that the Passover was always the shadow of. And check this out, the parallels are just stunning. The unblemished lamb points directly to Jesus, the sinless Lamb of God. The blood on the wooden doorposts becomes a picture of Christ's blood applied to the human heart, protecting us from wrath. The lamb roasted by fire prefigures Jesus enduring the fire of God's judgment on the cross. Even the tiny details, no broken bones, the unleavened bread symbolizing purity, eating in haste pointing to our spiritual readiness, it all lines up. The entire blueprint is fulfilled, from that very first act of a new calendar, signifying a whole new creation, all the way to the final meal. So we're left with this really powerful idea. An ancient ritual, just a single meal, forged the identity of a people and literally shaped history by telling this incredible story of judgment, substitution, and deliverance. And it kind of makes you wonder, doesn't it? In our fast-paced world today, what are the stories, the rituals, that are defining who we are?